Hello, parents and students. Once again, it's Mr. Guest. Welcome back. Let's dive straight into these notes. These notes cover exactly two ways and two different definitions, two terms that change our landscape. That's weathering and erosion. And like always, we begin with a question. And the question is, which occurs first, weathering or erosion? And my students know now that the answer is weathering. A lot of people, including adults, think that erosion occurs first. Matter of fact, many people believe that erosion is the same thing as weathering, but it's not. Weathering is the process of rock breaking down into smaller pieces, period. That's weathering. That has nothing to do with erosion. They are not related. Again, weathering, the process of rock breaking down into smaller pieces. Now, I just misstated. I said that weathering and erosion are not related. Of course, they are related, but they're not the same thing. Let me restate that. Weathering and erosion are very much related. They go hand in hand. However, they are not the same. Weathering is the process of rock breaking down. Just the fact that it's breaking down from a huge boulder like this to smaller rocks and then eventually into sand or sediment. Now, this doesn't happen in 2 weeks. No, we don't go from this to this in a month, not even in a year. This takes years and years and years. I'm talking millions of years for huge rocks like that, boulders, to become smaller rocks and pebbles and eventually become sediment or sand. Now, there are two different types of weathering. You have mechanical weathering, a fancy word for physical weathering. Mechanical weathering and chemical weathering. We're going to start with mechanical weathering. The breaking down of rock by wind, water, and ice. That's the technical definition that's in our book. However, the fact that rock is being broken down, and if it's done physically, that's mechanical weathering. We take these tree roots right here. Get a better example. So you got this huge slab of rock right here. And maybe this tree was very small, a young sapling at one point. And this tree root grew into a small crack. But of course that tree, it grew itself, and thus the roots grew. But even though these roots in between this crack or inside this rock, it's going to bust that rock open. And as you can see, you got a huge slab up here. Follow my mouse. Then you got little smaller pieces that are being broken down or broken apart. That's weathering. That is weathering. In fact, that's mechanical weathering because it's done in a physical way. During mechanical weathering, the minerals, the rock itself, it doesn't change. The makeup of the rock doesn't change, only the size. It's just broken down. It's smaller. It's not chemical. However, let's get to chemical weathering. A change in minerals as they react with substances or just things in the air, things in the environment, such as water or oxygen. Now, in some forms of weathering, whether it's chemical, you take stalagmites and stalactites, for example. You have carbonic acid that is produced by simple carbon dioxide bonding with or mixing with water that's inside caves. And since many caves are made of limestone, carbonic acid melts limestone. Limestone is too soft. All right, so carbonic acid, this acid produced or brought about by carbon dioxide and water mixing actually starts to melt this limestone. But because it's a solid, eventually it's going to solidify, which means become a solid again. So it melts it and it drips down, but then it becomes a rock or limestone. And eventually the stalactite, which is up top right here, will meet with the stalagmite. So the stalactite, if you want to get deep into it, it actually gives birth to stalagmites because this limestone, because of carbonic acid, actually drips down. Follow the mouse. It drips down. Drip. And then eventually it builds up here. So you have a puddle down here, but then it solidifies, becomes a solid rock again, but eventually it's going to build back up. At one point in time, this is going to actually touch. These will be connected. And a column will be made. As you can see with all these stalactites, you see there's a stalagmite right beneath it because they come from each other. or the stalagmite is built up by the dripping stalactite. That's chemical weathering. Now, erosion. I said that they are not the same, but they are related. After rock is weathered or broken down into small sediments, here comes erosion. Here's where erosion comes in the door. All right, erosion is the process by which soil and sediments are transferred, moved from one location to another, usually by wind, water, ice, and gravity. That's the technical definition. But erosion can occur on a numerous. It doesn't matter how this sediment, how this rock, how this sand is moved. If it's moved to another place in a natural, normal situation, that's erosion, period. Again, the process by which soil or sediment or sand is moved, even rock, is moved somewhere else. Erosion is more or less a verb. It's the process where you see sediments moving. Got it? It's not the whole process of rock being broken down. No, it's the rock that's been broken down because of weathered rock, and then erosion comes along and moves it. Capiche? Capiche. All right. Over time, weathering and erosion, because they're related, can flatten mountains or dig deep canyons and layers of rock, whether it's wind and sand blasting or rivers or ocean waves banging on the beach. All right. Over time, it had totally changed our landscape, and it has. Another definition. After weathering, here comes erosion. It picks up this sediment, it picks up this sand, and it throws it or blows it in the wind somewhere else, or it carries it or washes it away with water. Well, the sediment has to settle at some point. The wind has to stop blowing, and boom, it drops this sediment. Or the stream spews out into a tributary, or it spills out into the ocean, and this sediment settles. Once that sediment settles or stops moving, this process is called deposition, or when it's deposited. You know how you go to the bank, or you all in the future will go to the bank because you're going to have racks on top of racks. Y'all going to be paid. You're going to be able to deposit money into the bank. Well, deposition is the fact that the wind was carrying all this money, but eventually it's going to deposit it. That process is called deposition. Deposition is the process of dropping sediments onto a new place after being carried away from another place. Again, the process of dropping or depositing sediments onto a new place after being carried away from another place. Understood? Real simple, real quick. All right, weathering and erosion in a nutshell. Don't forget to rewrite and summarize these notes, young people. You know that's your homework. I want you to actually learn and keep this information. I want you to retain it. I want you to have it for good. And that's it. All right, I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.